I know some of you have been waiting forever for this video, so let's not stumble around it. Here goes. But before getting started, I do warn that this is going to be the first part of 4, as I just don't have the time to rank all 28 that I'm ranking, while also making sure that I give each series a fair and thorough review. So with all that being said, let's start off with one of the most interesting and different videos in the group, that of course being White Stag Education, for those who don't know, is a series of informational tapes about Grandwood Park, a national park that is filled with cultists who murder the people who visit, as well as worship this monster called the Adversary, which they feed the murdered people to. Unlike a lot of the other ones that I will be covering in this video, this one is actually mainly shot with footage instead of the pictures and text that have become super commonplace within the subgenre, as well as lacking really any text-to-speech, which really makes this series a breath of fresh air compared to many others. Also, unlike a lot of the other series, this one doesn't really take itself seriously at all. It knows it's goofy, campy fun, and that's it, which makes it a fun watch overall. It's surprisingly funny at points, which is all the more shocking because there are parts of this which can actually get you if you let your guard down enough, which is pretty smart, I think. It toys with you a bit more than some of the others, which makes it just overall pretty solid. Now, it's not perfect, it still has some quirks, and the acting can definitely be too much at times. Some of the story beats are a little pointless, and some episodes definitely give more than others. But it never really tries anything more than it's meant to be, and I give it credit for that. It's not trying to change the genre or anything, it's just a fun little short series. But if I had to give it a score, I would give it a B tier. I would highly recommend you give this one a watch for yourself, but now let's get on to Marble Hornets is a story that doesn't really need any introduction, as if you follow me, you have definitely heard of Marble Hornets at least once. Marble Hornets follows two college filmmakers as they investigate the disappearance of one of their friends. While searching for their friend, they run into this creature known as the Operator, which is of course the Slender Man that we all know and love. The Operator then hunts them down, picking them off one by one as they try and do everything to stop him before it's too late. This series is by far one of the earliest examples of this style of horror, as this comes from all the way back in 2009. This is one of the innovators of the genre. It's a fun watch, and honestly, while a lot of the effects are dated and cheesy, and they even were back then, I think its enjoyability and novelty for the time elevate it to a point where anyone can enjoy it. Yes, it's kind of goofy, many parts do not look good, and it's nowhere near perfect, but it has its charm, as while it's very rudimentary in its current state, it does what it needs to do and is overall super charming and incredibly entertaining. It never does more than it needs to, and it finds that perfect blend of storytelling and presentation. And honestly, sometimes I find myself still reminiscing about this series, and for a series to have that much of an effect on me till even now, I think it can't be really anything lower than an S tier. Go watch this one right now. Next up is, of course, this one is quite literally just a Sonic.exe fanfiction, and I wish I was kidding. While I normally try to give fair and honest critiques, I don't know if I can really review this one in good faith. Almost all of it is just what if this person actually encountered Sonic.exe, and it follows pretty much the same plotline as the original. There really isn't anything different or innovative about it, and a lot of it comes across as super fanfiction-y, even down to the animation style that is used. And I already don't like the Sonic.exe story, and just doing another version of that just kind of makes it so I don't like this. And unlike a lot of the other ones that we'll be covering today, I had actually never heard of this one before going to the ranking site, and it kind of caught my eye. Like, actually, is this what analog horror has come to, just doing Sonic.exe again? If so, I might have to retract last week's video if this is the norm. Like, I get they were probably just trying to improve on Sonic.exe, but this doesn't improve on it, it just has all the same issues, it's not worth watching. And because of all the issues stated before, the lack of original story, the animation style, and the boring pacing, I'm going to have to give this one an F for fanfiction. I really cannot recommend this one at all, but one that's a little bit closer to being recommended is Basswood County is really one of the most interesting ones on this sheet, as it's got a lot of good things going for it. The animation and art are quite impressive and really add to the experience while watching. The art here really follows a lot of the same ideas that Trevor Henderson's art follows, and it's a really interesting concept for an analog horror series. So presentation-wise, it's nearly flawless, as the pacing and shot design here really makes for an intriguing and interesting watch. But what really pulls this one down is the quite bad storytelling, as it's quite literally all been done before. The story in this one is just the Mandela catalog. That's it. It doesn't even add to the mythos. It's just, what if the demons came into this world trying to look like humans all over again, and it's really quite annoying. This one could do so much better if it had better writing, but the writing makes this one a slog to get through due to it just borrowing so much from the Mandela catalog. And the episodes that aren't directly copying the Mandela catalog are a slog to get through because nothing really happens in them. It's the same thing over and over again. And a lot of the changes that they do make to try and differentiate themselves from the Mandela catalog do not work at all, and instead drag the quality of it down to be nearly unwatchable. And it sucks because the art style in this one is just so good and unique, but my god, the storytelling of it is just so much of a drag. If I had to give a ranking for the most disappointing series overall, this would definitely win, because you can tell there's a ton of talent here, but it's all a squandered storyline that is a direct ripoff of one that's already been done before. And because of that wasted and squandered potential, it makes me want to prove a point that stories matter. So with all that being said, I would give it a solid C tier. C tier for me honestly just means proceed with caution. You may like it, you may not, just like the next one, which is So before getting into this one, I must preface that on this channel I do not really delve into sensitive subjects such as what the creator of this one did. And while I completely disagree and am quite disgusted by this creator's actions, that's not what this video is about. This is a fun ranking video, so let's continue. Quite possibly the most famous of all the FNAF VHS tapes, this is usually the analog horror most people seem to think about when it comes to the IP horror section. And it makes sense. This series has a ton of things going for it: high quality animation, good voice acting, and an intriguing story. But where I think this one really falls apart is that while the story is intriguing, it just is the FNAF storyline. It doesn't really add anything new or interesting to the story. And while that makes sense, it is the FNAF VHS tapes after all, it doesn't really add anything to the point where multiple episodes of it are kind of worthless. Many of the episodes do not push the storyline forward at all and essentially devolve into, uh-oh, there's a dead kid in there, multiple, and I mean multiple times. You can only do the same scare so many times before it devolves the story, and this one exemplifies that point to the strongest degree. So because of that, I really cannot give it any higher than a C tier, because this is just so much filler and the story doesn't really progress in a meaningful or interesting way. Proceed with caution, especially considering the creator's actions and behavior. Next up, however, is a true classic, being No Through Road is a fairly simple concept, and it makes sense why. This video was one of the first in the subgenre as a whole. It came out in 2009, way before what we think of as analog horror was a thing, and follows a group of teenage boys in the UK who go down a no-through road. But while going through, they realize that they are now caught within a time loop, as they go through the same section of road over and over again. But while exploring this loop, they run into a masked man who, when around, plays a creepy looping song over any device and chases them around. He then begins to pick them off one by one. It's an intriguing, although fairly simple concept, and the early YouTube production value really adds to the realism in this one. I would have to say though, it's a bit too close to found footage for me personally to consider it a full-on analog horror, but this website included it, so it's fair game. But while parts of this are extremely original and ahead of its time, one thing that always drags me out completely and made me wish it wasn't included. That of course being the looping song that plays whenever the killer appears. That's because the soundbite is ripped directly from The Strangers. Like, not even the same song put in, no, the audio is actually just the audio from The Strangers. It really drags me out of what I'm seeing every time I'm watching it, reminding me that it's just some silly YouTube video, not some found footage like it claims to be. Without the music, this would easily be an S tier for me, but because the music drags me out of it just so fast, I really can't give it anything higher than an A tier. So I still highly recommend checking this classic out, and for a newer classic, it's of course Now for the final one, let's talk about the one you guys have been requesting me to talk about for months now. Vita Carnis has got to be one of the most interesting and complete takes on the mimic section of analog horror that I've ever seen. The monster designs are stellar, and each time we see them, they just seem to get better and better with their effects and portrayal. Each episode just improves upon itself more and more, and with each one we get to see and understand these creatures on a more fundamental level. And while with the first few episodes it was quite slow and the presentation format didn't really blend with the style that they were going for, with each new episode it improved upon itself to the point where it's definitely one of the best, if not the best, analog horrors on the market right now. But with this ranking, I have to consider the series as a whole, which makes the score for this one kind of difficult. See, I think the early episodes of this one were quite weak and dull to watch, but with the newest one where they left a lot of the analog horror presentations out, instead of opting for a more found footage approach, I think it works much better. It went from subpar to one of the best in the market, and it's really got to be emphasized because we have seen so many series do the complete opposite. You can tell the creator recognized the flaws and improved upon it with each subsequent episode, and that's fantastic to see. But because of the quality of the earlier episodes, I still can't exactly give it an S tier that the newer episodes definitely reach, so because of that I unfortunately can only give it an A tier. But I would still highly recommend watching it if you haven't yet, and give it time. It does get better with each episode. And that is all for this week, and make sure if you haven't already to subscribe and comment down below what you think of these rankings. Do you think I'm completely wrong? Do you disagree? Or do you think I had a good score for most of these? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you all next week.